I'd like to hear just, from the beginning, like what did you hear as the design criteria and everything like that, and what were your initial thoughts on this?
I think the first thing I heard was Outrigger Canoe, which is like, I'm on it. The second thing I heard was it's going to be deck cargo on a cruising catamaran. It's like, okay, how big is that? And then I think I heard it needed to fit in a 12-foot by 4-foot by 4-foot cube or something like a rectangle. So, okay. So I think you'd already said we can take the bows off the ends, and that gives us so the 12-foot center section and then 2 4-foot ends. That gives us a 20-foot outrigger, and by the time you get up to around 20 feet, you can really do fun things. I mean, you're not so constrained by payload and waterline length, and so I was thrilled and started doodling right away. And so I guess let me see here. I just found this. This is one of the earliest drawings right here. There we go. From October, November time period, something like that.
Yeah, right.
And I was really excited because it's going to be an outrigger, in this case with 2 outriggers, making it a trimaran. I was really excited because we could make it very skinny, and it was going to be a really slippery, easy to drive hull, which makes me look like a hero, because basically whatever kind of sail rig you put on it, it's going to just sail like an ice boat or something like that. So, so you can see in this drawing, the 12-inch beam was what sort of came off and that persisted for quite a while through the design spiral. Kind of embarrassed to say how long, until it occurred to us that these theoretical people, shown only in elevation view here, had more than 12 inches of beam at the hip, so to speak, and that none of us could in fact sit in the outrigger. I was just thinking about like the really traditional ones where they just basically sit on top of it, right? And there was a book. I read this when I was probably in 4th or 5th grade. It was about a South Pacific islander who, a kid, this was like a YA before that was a thing, who disobeyed his parents, paddled his single outrigger canoe too far out, and got blown away in a storm, swims to a certain island, and builds another dugout canoe outrigger to sail home with. So 10-year-old, 11-year-old John, I would have been about 10 at that house. I went into the pine forest out behind our house and selected a pine tree that looked about the right width for a boat, and cut it down with a roofing hatchet or something like that. I had, my hands were just blisters, and I had carved about 4 cubic inches out of it before I realized that this would take the rest of my life to finish, and that also it was literally like 8 inches wide. But yeah, I was thinking, if you sit on top, then we can make it super skinny, but that wasn't going to work. So eventually we went around measuring belt lines and realized that we're going to have to kick this thing out some. And that's when it kind of, by happy accident, acquired this step in the midsection. One of, as Bob Ross would say, kind of a happy little accident, because it stiffened the sides, putting that chine and lap right there, and we could build this top bit out of plywood rather than having to strip it. So we saved a bunch of building time, and it probably looks kind of cool too. We still get a skinny waterline. I mean, I think it's way down, like the waterline is still less than 16 inches, I think. So that was exciting. On the screen and on paper, it was like, oh, this is going to be great. Because
with like a 16-inch or beam at the water line, what's that, like a 14:1 or something length to beam?
You don't ever interview me on math, and it's way down in the kind of like performance multi-hull area
Right.
of, 10 to 1 would be considered pretty good. And
Right.
this is way skinnier than that. So, and then, so it sort of kind of evolved from there.
Let's take one step back before we go any further. I want to ask you two things. First off, like from the very beginning was calling this, like a double outrigger sailing, paddling canoe. And I couldn't explain exactly, specifically why I felt that was the right term for it rather than trimaran. But I just recently saw, I think it might have been what you wrote recently. So can you just explain what your thoughts on the difference between those terms are?
Sure. I'll just pull up some graphical stuff here. If you can see that, that's it's described as a Tahitian outrigger. You notice it has two. And I did some research knowing I'd be asked this, and there isn't really, some firm type that is a Tahitian outrigger. I think that's just sort of modern people trying to find a name for something. But you did mention early on your interest in kind of the modern racing outriggers. And so that kind of like went into the into the DNA right away. And I'm trying to recall, let's see here. Halapuni, I believe, is the outfit in Hawaii that makes trimarans in essence, but they're really, they're outriggers. Let's see here.
Yes. Do you remember how you put it? Because you put it in a really, really good, simple way. What you thought the difference was in a very simple sentence or two.
Yeah, and always good to have a visual. I think of a trimaran as being really kind of a Western, a yacht in the Western tradition that is designed almost exclusively for sailing. Whereas an outrigger canoe is a boat that could be paddled. Many are. They're just paddled. It may have one outrigger, making it either an outrigger or we won't go down the proa road here, but or two outriggers, depending on where in the South Pacific you are. There is some good stuff on the internet kind of talking about regional types, and yours manages to kind of, thread the needle between lots of different ones. And this is a Hanapuni canoe right here. And this is, sure, Holopuni. Thank you.
Yeah,
my apologies. Not the first time I've got that wrong. Holopuni. And you mentioned this really early on as an inspiration, and it is, it was like, okay, cool, that looks like fun. So what this has, skinny hull, quite a lot of freeboard, compared to what you're used to in something that you paddle. Skinny, easily driven, but very convex lines. You know what I mean? So like, the boat curves outward everywhere.
Right.
Where, instead of like, kayaks often have this very, kind of a bottlenose, sharp entry, which is great in smooth water, and light air and things like that. But like in this photo, from Holopuni's website, that wouldn't work in this situation. You can see really that this is, there's a lot of volume in the bow. So that was, something that was easy and logical to do. And the boat was still so skinny that it wasn't going to cramp your form, whether you were paddling or pedaling with your Mirage drive.
Is that? Could you say concave curves like on a kayak or ocean kayak versus convex curves, like especially in the bows, in the end sections? Does one lend itself more towards paddling and one more towards high performance sailing, or how would you?
Yeah, it all depends on the engine. The easy way to put it, whether it's literally an engine or whether it's a sail or whether it's a human engine. And for there's not a lot of, you're not putting out a lot of horsepower paddling with a canoe paddle. say, or even with a Mirage drive, as miraculous as they are. So you want a very, very easily driven hull, and all things being equal, if you have a fairly fine entry within some limits, then you'll use less power. Less power is needed to get the boat moving at a good speed. As you start to pile on the horsepower, though, then boats with fine entries and fine sterns, for that matter, start to just in static conditions, they're going to kind of dig a deep bow and stern wave, which is slow. But when you turn on the power, whether it's because you're doing this, or maybe sometimes literally you've got an outboard. I designed an Outrigger powerboat one time that got built, and it was same thing, kind of very full in every direction. So you can definitely increase the potential speed and decrease the likelihood of doing a forward somersault when you get to the bottom of a wave. So yeah, it's rare, in my little niche of canoes, kayaks, small sailboats, and things like that. It's pretty rare to have anything that's got the kind of speed potential where having very full ends. But if you scroll through really fast multi-hulls, both power and sailboats on the web, then you'll find they pretty much are full at the front. For all the given reasons, flatter bow and stern wave, full at the stern. This one it's just kind of great because you're so skinny that we kind of have the best of both worlds. So I'm sure it's I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's fast when the water's calm, and you're paddling. So you didn't give up a whole lot there. If you were going to be paddling all the time or 50% of the time, we probably would have made the boat a little more delicate underwater. It seems to me like you were going to be sailing whenever you could. So.
Right. Yeah. So everything you said in the past few minutes has kind of touched on, paddling versus sailing, and there's obviously no boat is perfect for anything. In my mind, in my very amateur understanding of these kinds of boats and design and everything, I thought that this project we could find a really nice balance of paddling and sailing, kind of what you're saying. So what else is to you, what was a compromise? I mean, I guess you touched on it already, but what else was a compromise on both the sailing side of things and the paddling side of things? And then on the contrary, what kind of complemented each other and as you came to this very nice balance of both of those things in this boat?
Well, you can remember, I think that the first question I asked you really early on in the design spiral was how fast you wanted to go. Like what would represent to you an interesting and entertaining speed under sail specifically. Because if you're going to be up in the teens, going 15 knots, which is not only kind of Hobie Cat speed, but like well sailed, well skippered Hobie Cat kind of speed, then you have to do a lot of things differently. And the primary thing really was the length and storage limitations. So we got to fit everything into 12 feet. So unless we made the AMAs, the outriggers or floats, however you like to say it, unless we made those demountable as well, then they're going to have to be 12 feet long. I mean, that's just, that's that, because if you want to be able to fold them up without having to, take them apart as well, then that settled that. So, all right, we've got 12-foot AMAs right now, and that's going to be that's going to be your speed limit right there. So that's going to determine how much sail area we can put on this thing, and that in turn is like, how strong do we need to build it? Because it has quite a few multi-hulls like this, and one of the frustrations is how quickly the loads build. The engineering loads build as if we doubled your sail area, it would really you probably need these amas to probably be at least half again longer, if not the same length. So that was, once we decided, okay, we want to be able to pop up to 10 knots in good conditions, which I believe you may have in fact seen so far. I haven't heard the full report, but it's going to be sailing into 5 to 7, 8, 9, and that's great fun. Those are good fun speeds. So once I had that, then pretty much, the volume of these guys, how full, how much flotation we put into the amas, and how much sail area, and then how strong does all this have to be? That all just sort of fell into place based on that. So that was really how we got to this point. Except for this, I'm notorious. I despise affectation. Baggy wrinkle and like trail boards and just any kind of like funny business, but somehow it just did not look right without the these vaguely South Pacific Oceania style upturns at the bow and stern. And do they help? I doubt it. It's a tiny bit more buoyancy if you are really screaming down the back of a wave and punch into the one in front of you, but mostly it just kind of looked right. So
yeah, I when
you never
I first,
complained, so
no, yeah. When I first saw it, because I've seen, I've been obviously scouring the internet for something similar to what I've been dreaming up for the past 4 years, 5 years maybe, and I'm not a good drawer or graphics person or anything like that, so I couldn't draw it. And there's not many examples of, in my mind, what would be right, except maybe the Holopune. I think they do a good job. I think it looks amazing. But then those
are very kind of like location specific. Big swells off Maui, whatever. I'm not an expert in a particular world, but yeah. So that happened to kind of match what you wanted to do sometimes.
Yeah, and when I saw your first initial drawings and I saw those, those curves and both, like what you're saying, in the ends of the amas and the ends of the main hull itself, but also along with the curves of the akas, the cross beams, like I thought you just nailed it there. I thought that, that just fits right in with what I had imagined. So you see some examples of these styles of boats, or attempting these styles of boats, and like the cross beams, for example, might just be like a straight aluminum bar or something. And
I've done some of those.
Right.
It saved a lot of construction time.
Right.
It was light too.
It's full, light, cheap, but and maybe for modern, for trimarans it would look just fine. But for a boat like this, like I think those nicely curved akas just fit right in with the style.
Well, functional too. I wanted you to be able to sit on them, on a trampoline. So getting you, the curves, you're getting some elevation and you're getting some wave clearance and that sort of thing. So I look at those and all I see is function. So I'm pleased that it also looks nice. But and of course there were adventures along the way with those two, as we'll reveal. Yeah, and then like the Mirage drive thing, which is just, I have to say, I mean, I'm so jealous of Hobie. I mean, it's like I don't actually know who exactly came up with that, or whether it was a team or whether it was just one guy who's now retired somewhere in the South Pacific. But it's an amazing piece of equipment, and it's just, the amount of thrust. We put them in a couple of other designs of ours where we designed the boat kind of around it, and so that was one of your kind of design brief givens, was a Mirage drive. I'm not sure we'd have said yes, except that if we hadn't done one before, because we had to create all the CAD drawing work for fitting it in there. I can pull that up right quick.
Which I have to add is it was a forwarded request from Sierra, and in the end, I mean, I was indifferent. I don't know. I haven't used them much, but I have heard great things. But she has, and she really liked it, and she really liked the idea of it in this boat. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was it was a mess because, again, and it's my fault because I started out with a boat so skinny. I was kind of just besotted with the idea of having, no real limitations on hull width because we had, a trimaran kind of stability, right? And then it was like, oh, by the way, we got to get this Mirage drive in there. So, I mean, we knew that from the beginning, but I missed pretty badly in early models. And fortunately, before we'd actually built anything, it's kind of like, okay, I don't think your legs will fit in here. So that could be that could be a challenge. I'm kind of just getting to that photo right quick. But you can here's a what do we see here? We see not one but three Mirage drive trunks, kind of on the way to getting the right one. So just kind of getting the geometry to work well. And somewhere I have pictures of you and Sierra actually just kind of trying out. I think we made about 4 cockpit rings along the way until the clearances were good for a proper stroke. There's another view of the trunk, and this became integral, an integrated part of the boat eventually. And let's see here. I've got some other photos of you guys trying it out and looking a little bit like, Harris, about this. And yeah, I definitely didn't. Really, until you guys sat in it, So that was. I love Steve's look of disapprobation over here. You see, these are there's a paper. We kept trying different shapes, paper patterns, and things to see how that would work. But one of the things I learned along the way, and probably not as soon as I should have, was that all boats that are designed around the Mirage drive are really, very shallow, in fact, and in fact, almost all of them are sit on top. So, you've got a great, big old hole in the boat, a trunk, basically like a more elaborate dagger board in essence, and the problem was that somewhere along the way, just by the time the boat's displacement was established and all this, then the top of our trunk, which you can see in the photo there, was dangerously close to the boat's loaded waterline. And so again, a lot of head scratching there. And we ultimately kind of made it as high as we could, and the ergonomics still work. But in fact, at speed, you discovered that it was a very wet trunk indeed. And while we were at the Everglades Challenge start, I walked around and took photos of Mirage drive installations, and every single one of them was a boat that was no more than like 10 or 12 inches deep in the middle. And here we had your boat, which is really close to 20, 24 inches deep or something like that. So it ended up working, I guess, and kind of when the boat wasn't heavily loaded and you were, relatively calm conditions, but when you were either sailing fast and or loaded, it sounded like you had water coming in. So there we go. This is a better view of the kind of the nearly final installation right there. So the fix, which I packed into my checked baggage on the flight down, getting there, a matter of hours before the start of the Everglades Challenge, was a skirt, essentially like a kayak spray skirt, to put around that. So did that work? I mean, or was it clumsy, or did it actually work?
Yeah, it certainly worked to keep. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to judge the percentage of water. There was a little bit. The only water that actually came in was there was just a little fold under the collar that we used to kind of smush down this. So it was just a little, kind of squirting through that fold, and but it kept.
Yeah, that's an easy fix. Yeah,
super easy, and it kept almost all the water out. It worked very well. The only besides that little bit of water that was coming in, the only problem with it was just it was a little more cumbersome swapping out the plug for sailing versus the drive itself. But
That was going to be the trade-off for sure.
yeah, I
But
still
and you have a plug that you put in when you take the Mirage drive out. So at that point, you've got this kind of clean, very clean underbody.
right, which is still definitely a work in progress. But I think the skirt concept is certainly definitely a good solution for that. And I can think of I just recently thought of another way where we can make it less cumbersome with maybe the other you left us another sail bag to use.
Right. Oh, and by the way, I probably have 25 of those in the attic at CLC. So.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, I was indifferent about the Hobie Mirage drive in there, but it is such a functional, impressive, piece of engineering, and really, we concluded that in the end, like, paddling with the Outrigger canoe paddle, you can really build, you can get a lot of power, and you can build boat speed super quick in a short amount of time, but you cannot beat the Mirage drive for keeping consistent boat speed over a longer period of time. And you can still get quick bursts, but just that long consistent or that consistent boat speed over a period of time. Like in calm conditions, Sierra can drive the boat at 3 knots for an hour plus, and just maybe just a tiny bit under that for as long as she wants all day, basically.
Yeah, well, yeah, 2.5, 3 knots is very, very good for something, especially something as heavy as this is compared to just a single kayak. I mean, 1,000 years ago when I was in good shape, if I could have kept up 2.5 or 3 knots in a kayak, I was in very fit condition, really. And again, it's kind of like that's jogging speed on shore. It's faster than you can walk, So, really, so I mean, it's not OC1 kind of speed or surf ski kind of speed, but then those aren't going to have all the function because here's the kind of the funniest thing about this whole adventure we've had over the last just 3 months since we started making sawdust. It's crazy. I was not aware that you were going to be in the Everglades Challenge until about week 3 of our 4-week build at Chesapeake Lightcraft. And I'd love to have had a shot of the look on my face. I mean, you asked, I think you asked very broad strokes. You asked me about something. I've been down there and, I made a mess, which is true. But I think that maybe you and Ed, Chesapeake Lightcraft's president, had talked about that, but he hadn't passed that along. So,
I got to say, I probably wasn't, very direct about it. I don't even know how much Ed I know I've mentioned it, probably just to Ed, but even between Sierra and I don't even think we were sure we were going to do it. I think we were kind of under the impression with ourselves that we'd make sure we could do it. Like the boat was on its way and stuff, and we didn't even sign up until like the last minute, like the last week with you guys in late January, and make where it looked like the boat would be done and we'd be able to do it. So
right. Well, that's sensible too, because it probably wasn't clear till about week 3 that you were going to make the start. So the whole idea of the Everglades Challenge, though, it ended up being, I think, the best thing for the boat design itself. That I didn't have that in mind, because I would have drawn a completely different boat.
So what would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, we would still have had the, has to fit into a, folded into a 12-foot space thing. That would have still been, nothing would have changed about that. But I would have probably given you a ton more sail area, maybe still with a kind of oceanic lateen rig, but, just a lot more. And I'd have probably made the boat lighter, which would have been at odds kind of with, the use that I had envisioned, which was as a, kind of a tender to the mothership when you weren't off having adventures in it. So it probably would have been more fragile. Um, it it probably would have been shaped differently. I mean, I probably would have run the stern out to something like a transom. You know, it's like a small transom like you see on a NACRA, you know, catamaran, something like that. Because there's just advantages in increasing the prismatic coefficient. You can, you know, you're not going to be pulling a stern wave along. So yeah, that would have been something. You know, again, I think I would have been really, really focused on the on keeping the thing light. And you know, maybe different design for the Amas. I probably would have diminished the boat's capabilities under paddling and Mirage drive power in favor of more of a sailboat. Whether that was the right thing to do or not, that's probably would have at least gone through my mind. So, you know, what you got instead was this kind of all around utility outrigger. You know, it you know, enjoys most of the advantages of a sailing trimaran, but also the advantages of being able to paddle it, and it's simple. I mean, you know, the rig is just kind of 2 strings. It's kind of a halyard and a downhaul, and you know, it's easy to douse the rig the way it is right now. And you may have ended up with like what I call an upwind rig, you know, a main and a jib, you know, something like that. I don't know. But I think you ended up with a much more versatile boat as a result of me having no idea that you were going to enter the Everglades Challenge. Of course, you know, the fact that it was built kind of super strong, it can only be an advantage down the line. And the fact that it's easier to, you know, quick to rig and de-rig and all of that, again, that's not race optimized, but it's perfect for what you are hoping to use it for.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, especially this year, where we had all sorts of conditions. I thought it was like almost the perfect boat. We did the race with the intention not to go all out and not sleep and win, but to complete it on our first one and kind of just do our best while documenting it and experiencing the race to its fullest. But we had, you know, light upwind conditions, no wind conditions in tight channels, and then some incredible downwind conditions that we went offshore for, which was amazing. And
can't wait to see the video of that. That looks like fun.
I'm so we knew it, but of course on a GoPro it looks like you're surfing in a lake.
Yeah, the camera's always flat in waves, you know, so it never looks quite as exciting as, you know.
We'll have to just zoom in on our expression and hopefully portray the excitement that way in the footage. But
yeah, that just sounds like way too much fun. I think this was, you know, I must have stolen this one from your Instagram feed or something like that. But you know, the thing that always terrifies me about those, is that one up? I think it is.
Not yet. I don't see it.
Oh, I'm not sharing it. Oh, that's what it is. But yeah, you know, they've gotten between like, you know, 60 and 100 competitors going back 20 years for the Everglades Challenge, and you can, you know, I was in the first one for like a minute until I had like one of the worst boats anyone ever brought. That's another story. But you know, there's just a lot of boats just aren't finished when they get there. They were projects that, you know, were designed for the race or whatever. And so, you know, kind of another thing, you know, I think your boat arrived there really quite complete. I mean, other than solving the, you know, the water fountain in the Mirage drive trunk, we didn't have a whole lot of things that blew up because it was a fairly conservative design. I think, you know, this picture, first thing I look at is the doubler on the on that boom, we were frantically epoxying and lashing, in fact, just like the technology.
If anyone doesn't know the story by the time this comes out, you were helping us the day before the race.
This is like 10 p.m. I mean, we were like
10 p.m.
It was like dark and yeah.
And
I was like, yeah.
We were we had the rig up and we were testing it, and I kind of just yanked on the downhaul, I think, and without I had the main sheet on tight or something, and just yanked on the downhaul and just heard a little, and sure enough, we cracked right under the doubler.
And it was not going to make it to the start line like that, So it's like, well, I've got some West System G Flex here, and we've got a bunch of lashing cords. Let's just, we do. If we epoxy and lash it, I expected to hear from you Saturday afternoon on the first day. It broke. What am I supposed to do? You could see you lashing one of the, a paddle shaft or something around that thing.
But luckily, and so we don't say these kinds of things during the race, but now that the race is over, nothing broke. It was a miracle. The closest call we had to something breaking was I dropped the tiller. The tiller.
My knot stretched here. That wasn't quite what it is. That's supposed to be close together. But sorry, go ahead.
I was eyeing that. I knew all I had to do was tighten that knot, but it was.
It was done in a hurry.
But like you said, I think it just stretched out a bit. But I dropped the tiller extension, and we had the loop like you suggested, which was awesome. The loop kind of catches it from falling all the way down the water and getting dragged back away from you, but somehow it fell out of that loop, and it did get dragged back away from me and bent, and it was inside the rudder hinge, and it was we weren't sailing hard or anything. I forget exactly what the scenario was, but it was so close to breaking, and I had to, luckily I could stand. Actually, I got the boat, I stood, I held the boat, and I worked its way out without snapping it. So that was the closest thing we had to breaking, which is awesome for a race like that.
Yeah, again, conservative design. I mean, so that kind of saved us in that respect, I think. And I think I would have done everything a little bit chancier, but you guys had a very solid mid-fleet finish or better.
Yeah, and I'll add on to one thing you were mentioning in the beginning. We were talking about convex curves on the boat, and especially in the ends, and which obviously more volume in the ends. And when we had those 2 afternoons of downwind sailing and surfing, I gotta say, man, the bow did not show 1 ounce of wanting to bury in the normal conditions offshore. When we did start to round around Cape Sable, we had some current going against the waves and the wind, and so much shorter period waves, much steeper waves, and the bow did start to bury just a little bit, but it still was not concerning at all. It felt completely under control. It did not feel like it wanted to pitch pole or anything, which was, I was impressed, especially once we got into those really steep conditions, which was so cool to feel.
Well, that's great. I mean, I just, I remember our very first conversation, that we were sharing, the Halapuni canoes, and I was just thinking, well, first of all, I know that you're a performance, sailing kind of guy, and so that was going to be something you were going to go out and drive this boat sometime. So that certainly was part of the calculus. Just giving it enough volume where it mattered, that it could be really fun to sail and not terrifying. It's nice. It's also mostly enclosed. I mean, it basically has 2 kayak cockpits, really, which allows you to endure probably much worse weather than you might have otherwise.
Which
in
definitely
a super traditional canoe like this.
And comfy and cozy. And then that storage hatch that your cursor's on was a massive storage compartment and completely dry. I don't think we got 1 ounce of water in there the whole time.
It's funny how that was there in the very, very, very first drawing, because I was like, well, we're gonna have to attach the cross beams to something, and it's going to be a daggerboard trunk, and which I'd just as soon have that come all the way up to the deck, so that if you do get swamped, you don't have to bail. So it just sort of was there was a space here, and these the Akas also they had to be very close together compared to what you might see in a more kind of sailing oriented trimaran, which they would be quite a bit further apart. But I had the constraint of there needing to be enough room to paddle, both for the crew in front and the crew in back, without their paddle hitting the crossbeam, right? And so they ended up kind of crammed close together. As it turned out, they probably, the rear cockpit between this take apart bulkhead here, which, I mean, that had to be there at the 16-foot point on the boat in order to take the ends off. And then the Mirage drive here, it's like you had just enough space for the Mirage drive in that back cockpit. So, if either of you had been a couple inches taller, we may have spent more time scratching our heads, but I was starting to get worried about getting the crossbeams any closer together than they already were, just from racking loads.
Right. So I don't know if you want to say anything more about the design itself, but we can, if you do go ahead, we could talk about the construction a little bit.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely do that. This was Chesapeake Lightcraft specializes really in kind of easy and very quick to build boats. We have a pretty big back catalog of more advanced boats, and this would probably fall into the category of the more advanced boats that you might build. And all that aside, it was it was a pretty straightforward build. Just again, long skinny hulls are also easy to. That's a lot easier than like a dinghy that's got it's wide at the transom and then hollow at the bow kind of thing. That's hard to plank, and these kinds of things. Let's see here, just pretty straight runs for the strips, so that made it easy. And then having ringers come around helped a lot too. Joey specifically from Turning Point, Joey Schott, coming around to vacuum bag the carbon fiber on the boat. I hasten to add now, as I did then, that I don't think this boat really needs the carbon fiber. I think we could have made it about, certainly strong enough and at about the same weight just using e-glass. But hey, as long as we had sponsors and expertise on hand, that boat ended up bulletproof. I remember, there were some kind of cutouts and things sitting around, and I was just like, they're like stronger than aluminum. So yeah, I mean, you can hit something very hard with this boat.
So we did, so for those who don't know, we did 6 ounces of carbon on either side of the cedar strip, and then 4 ounces of S-glass on top of that. And then we also had a small, long section of 1708 right on the very bottom for some added durability there.
Just dragging up the beach kind of stuff.
So what would you think, what do you anticipate the recommended layup is for, for the future for this kind of boat, carbon aside?
Yeah, well, I mean, my inclination, again, just to try to make it easy to build, would be probably just, bead and cove, cedar strips, and something like a layer of 6 ounce e-glass inside and a layer of 6 ounce e-glass on the outside, maybe, lapped for a double thickness down the middle, something like that. I mean, that would make it wouldn't be as bulletproof as your boat, but it sure would be a heck of a lot easier to lay out. But yeah, I think that from my peculiar position, which is helping people build boats, especially their first couple of boats, maybe that I spend a lot of time explaining kind of what's good about carbon fiber and what's terrible about it, and quite aside from the expense, but it's hard to apply for a fairly fundamental reason. I'm going to simplify this a lot so that you're going to get angry emails from all the kind of composite wizards out there. But this is just kind of e-glass right here. These are the cheeks of your rudder, and when you fiberglass something like this, the fiberglass turns clear. Hooray! And you've got the right, at least roughly the right amount of epoxy in there, right? And this also has fuel play on it, so we don't need to go down that road. But carbon, on the other hand, when you saturate it with epoxy and put it on a boat, it doesn't change color. It doesn't give you really any obvious clues as to whether you have it saturated with epoxy or not. And the upshot to that, and I'll find a photo here in a second, is that you can either end up with a very dry layup that's not very strong, or you can end up with a very heavy layup because you have too much resin in there. And neither is ideal. And by the way, you were paying $41 a yard for the carbon. So, but I think for a lot of folks, it's just the cachet. This boat has carbon fiber in it. It has magical properties. It's there's kind of a mysticism around it. I mean, I know if you order a Lamborghini or something like that, you can pay an extra $30,000 to have clear coated carbon fiber on your dashboard or whatever. So it always has had that kind of just kind of cachet and street cred and things like that. Whenever I've seen folks who don't have much experience with carbon use it, they end up with very heavy structures. I remember someone making one of our kayaks with our add-on trimaran rig and it was built with carbon fabric, just kind of treating the carbon like it was e-glass, and the kayak itself was over 90 pounds.
Wow.
Like it couldn't be lifted. It was a heavy lift for two people. So yeah, not a ton of fun, and that's always really kind of jinxed me. But if you can, that's why you hear about vacuum bagging in these scenarios. This is vacuum bagging the deck of the hull, the carbon onto the underside of the deck, which is you really actually want carbon on the inside faces of panels like this. And as a result, I think you had very, very close to an optimal resin to fabric ratio. That's the I guess that would be the inside of the hull, right?
Yeah.
When you guys bag that. So this is not resin infusion, which is that's another way of applying of getting it right with carbon fiber, and you can just Google resin infusion. But so this was hand laid up, but with great care, but then vacuum bagged to really make sure you had a very hard, flat, and not surface without puddles of resin or worries about adhesion. So
right.
that worked out amazingly well. Like I say, the cutouts from this boat of various pieces were just it was kind of eerie to handle them. They weren't light though. I mean, I think the boat ended up, it was a little bit heavier than I expected in the end.
Yeah.
Some of that may have been all the microballoons on the Amas. I don't know.
I think you're saying, what you said, future boats being laid up with 6-ounce e-glass, and even if doubled up on the underneath on the center, like that, it's certainly not going to be any heavier than what ours came out to, and plenty of strength still, right? I mean, the cedar core itself is decent.
Cedar just on its own, it's unlike say foam. The cedar does have some structural properties in a boat like this. Obviously, in our case, it's mostly just functioning to hold the inner and outer, skins of where all the strength is together. But the web of an I-beam kind of thing. But so this was, I guess, that's putting on that patch of quite heavy fabric. I forget what that was. That 12-ounce 1708 or whatever it was. That was for your running up on the beach or dropping the boat, while hoisting it aboard, something like that. So, so I guess this was a one giant wet layup, with the carbon being put on top of that. And then I guess, I actually didn't mean to do that. Here's a video. So that's probably putting that little kind of S-glass scrim on the outside there. just because carbon fiber it's not great at surviving dings and chips and stuff like that. So there is this S-glass, just a very, very, quite lightweight layer on the outside, if I recall correctly. Is that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So just a couple of ounces of something, and then peel ply, which I think is what we're looking at here, as obviously the final layer before the vacuum bag was put on there. So so that was construction. I mean, it moved along. It was the usual. We did more design as we go than I'm really proud of. I mean, I like to have it kind of finished, and a lot of the problems solved. And there was just a really a kind of a boneheaded error at the CAD CAM design stage with the amas, which were made out of cheap pink foam from Home Depot. I must have an earlier photo here someplace. Milled on the CNC machine, and the idea is that you get, kind of the same way you build a half model. You get lips, and you can, and then you can just give it a sanding and glass it. You're done. You have like exactly the shape you wanted, right? And not quite how it worked out, but there were some considerations. Like, for one thing, like, we could have used our big CNC machine to mill this finished shape. Rather, 4 halves is what it would be. We'd have done 4 halves basically on the CNC table. We have done stuff like that. It's really slow. I mean, it takes a long time. It doesn't matter how much money you spend on your machine. You can only kind of drive the bit through the foam so quickly. You don't want it to melt. You don't want it to clog with chips or whatever. So we just kind of, to keep things moving quickly, we took that the approach of of doing it in lifts and things like that. And there was a right way to do this and a wrong way to do it. We did it the wrong way. So the upshot was a long series of nights on my part, and an 8-foot long sanding board. So really, like I said, we won't make that mistake again. So anyone who's going to come around to build another one of these in the future is not going to have that issue. But it did end up being just a nightmare of fine pink bits, to get it fair. And they did in the end. I have to tell you, I was so apprehensive. I hadn't seen the boat, once it went to Florida, until I right before the Everglades Challenge. And you guys had done such a nice paint job. I was like, do I need to disown the project? This was just why I sort of like I ended up doing all the fairing on those. It was just a god awful thing. Yeah. It's sort of, when you have a $300,000 CNC machine, you ought to be able to get to, basically like 120 grit fair surface, ideally. So there were all kinds of issues that,
So what do you think? So how will that come out in the future? Like, if a customer orders a kit in a year or whatever, what do you think that would look like for the AMAs?
Well, instead of doing the lifts, we call these lifts, that you can see they're quite thick, and they're also oriented this direction. And the specific failure mode was right there. This step. I mean, it's actually a very subtle curve for it to work. These things are kind of, again, kind of for multi-hull sailing purposes. That, the AMAs are really kind of straight down the, kind of almost, cylindrical down the middle, and then they fare in with a fairly, really quite a complex shape at the ends. And like, unfortunately, this style of lifts left a great deal to interpretation in terms of getting the shape right. So in the future, like, instead of the lifts going this direction, then I would do sections, a bunch of sections. So really just literally like an inch thick. And that, in that scenario, it would be the desirable, just light sanding before you glass them, kind of thing. I mean, that's the ideal really there. Somewhere I have, here's the photo. These things were made just like a surfboard. So there was a piece of plywood, a keel, as it were, in the middle. Someone, not me, decided that putting lightning holes in the foam was a good idea, even though the stuff weighs basically nothing. And as a result, we were not able to vacuum bag these things because it would have collapsed the Amas. That's another thing that the folks at home, so to speak, will not have to fret about. Live and learn. It's one of those things you just have to watch all the time. But, I'm not totally turned off of making holes that way, but you can see all of the micro balloons that ended up on this boat. As I was telling people, I was joking around the internet, and I posted this photo and with the caption, "It's just not fair." And there was like a tiny percentage of people who know exactly what I meant when I said that. But that was the aftermath of the great pink nightmare Ama adventure. Of course, they ended up, and like I say, in your hands, they ended up looking super nice.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. In the very end, like even weight wise, despite all the fairing content and everything, they didn't feel individually super heavy at all. They felt pretty light.
Yeah, they were light. They could have probably been 10 pounds lighter, though. So, it's just like, oh well. You just can't. You're not going to win every one of those, and that's live and learn. So, yeah, that. Let's see here. Any more photos of that? Of course, then I can't. I really have to come clean on this publicly, which was that this was not the last kind of crushing nightmare in this particular quick build scenario. I'll see if I can find the photo right quick. But this was we spent quite a bit of time making these really nice. Let me see here. We'd made these nice curvy Akas that you mentioned specifically. They're functional. They were not simple by any means. And here they are being laminated. Sitka spruce, and then they got kind of an outer reinforcement of carbon fiber, just because we could, basically, not because they really needed it, and then they got shaped, and I've got this part of it was fun, and just they were tapered elegantly in all directions, and so we ended up with these. I think again, something that was intended to be an aesthetic feature of the boat, as well as being completely functional, and we did ultimately get there. So they were made theoretically, they were made a little bit big out here at the where my mouse is, so that we could trim them to kind of the final outrigger height.
Right, a little long, yeah.
So they were made a little bit long, right? Yeah, and the idea was that when we did the kind of final assembly, we could just double check that before we glued them in. And it was the last day you were here. It was on a Friday, I guess first week of February, something like that. And everybody's running around. We're do this, do that. Lots of things to get done. And I sent the subaltern down back to the computer to say, hey, look at the latest, greatest, final version of where we're supposed to cut these things. It came back, and I looked at it and said, man, that's cutting off a lot. All right. So I think that. So here's like the mark, and then there's the notch for the plywood keel. And then as soon as we chopped them and then assembled the boat, this is like literally like the next photo in the sequence, and I was just from here, I could tell that they were sitting really high. These outriggers were sitting much higher than any of the drawings for sure. And I probably turned white as a sheet. You were probably too busy to notice, but here we are. Let's see. But they had to be glued in that minute. That was a really time sensitive kind of a project there. So it's just like this has to be done right. And I ran back into the computer to see just like, all right, how screwed are we exactly? That's this. They've been glued in, and then a fillet, and then some carbon and peel ply right there. It's like, well, they're going to be a couple inches high, so it ought to be okay when the boat's loaded. But this is what happened. I mean, this is the result. And you can see like, the boat lightly loaded wants to flop onto its side, and from the point of view of a fairly busy naval architect, I mean, this is something that like I can get this right. I mean, this is I certainly had my share of face palm kind of moments in naval architecture, but this is one that's really pretty straightforward. You put the floaty things kind of at the water line, so they're just skimming, and then off we go. We knew what the boat weighed, so anyway, there you are. So that's how it ends up. So
about an inch and 3/8.
Yeah, I think it was more than that. I mean, I hadn't, for a long time, I was not able to actually open the files without feeling dizzy and nauseous. So I had to leave that. But I think last week when I did a blog post about it, I had to actually go back in and look at some stuff. And it was. I think it was supposed to be more than, more than 1 3/8. I mean, like basically they were the right length. This pattern came from fairly early in the design process somewhere, and it turns out to have been about the right length. Sort of the carpenter's pencil for scale. You can see that if we just cut that notch right at the bottom right there, it'd have been perfect. And the boat would have floated. I mean, you want a couple of degrees. You don't want them immersed, but
right. You don't want them both like really displacing water, standing still. Like
So in the event, I mean, like once you were loaded, it was it wasn't that, so that that's like the start. Everybody's challenge. It was better. So I ran around the corner and basically just pulled up the CAD and we weighed the boat. I'm like, stop, we're gonna weigh the boat because we should. And we did. And so I had to wait, and I went around the corner and looked at where the amas were going to be, and like, all right, well, we can live with this. So it's just kind of like one of those things that maybe down the pike. And again, like the folks at home who may want to build one of these from kit or plans, they can count on that part being right for sure.
Yeah. And what was the lesson learned? Basically, measure 8 times and cut once.
Right. I mean, like we'd spent like 2 weeks making these really nice laminated things, and and then we chopped them on the bandsaw too short, and and it really, like, I was sitting there thinking, can I like scarf a piece in? Like, it was going to be a couple of days to fix it. And you didn't have a couple of days. I didn't really have a couple of days. So I knew the boat would sail and paddle fine. It's just like people are going to be like, and why are they so far out of the water? And I'm like, that'll be me. Yeah, hi. So it's just, live and learn. We'll swap those out eventually. And I have, once I sort of came back down to earth, I realized we could do a very, very clean scarf joint right there and add some in. It wouldn't be really noticeable. It'd be plenty strong, and that'd be a quick way to do it. But I'd probably have to have the boat, maybe back at our shop. I don't know. Depends on what you do. I might trade you for those amas though, because I have another boat that could use them.
Okay, there you go. So we'll keep brainstorming.
Yeah, because I know like the next time we mill those out of foam, then I'm not going to have 5 nights where I have to stay at the shop till midnight.
Yeah.
But that's it's a prototype, and and we're humans, and there you go. Yeah, you still had a good time with it, and I think it's still fully functional.
Yeah, absolutely, fully functional still. Like you said, when it was loaded up, it was not not super. When it's lightly loaded, it just tips a little further, but still, I mean, all the other features of it, are everything's super functional still. So.
Well, Billy, so you've got a beautiful cruising catamaran on the way, basically, and you're gonna this is going to be like one of, I imagine you'll have a dinghy off the stern, but you'll also have this deck cargo. I mean, so where are you going to go? What adventures are you going to have? I mean, are you going to be in Fiji where you can go, or, Outer Banks, or?
Yeah, where just the order of things just depends on timing, with where we're actually going to cruise the boat. Ultimately, we definitely want to get back to the Bahamas, definitely want to get down to Panama, and then from there, we're not really sure. Probably hang around, Central America for a bit, both on the Caribbean side, then the Pacific side, and then, we're kind of up in the air. Eventually, I do want to get to French Polynesia for sure, like, absolutely. And I got to say, like, where my original ideas, for just the concept of what I wanted, years ago. So I remember sitting in an anchorage in Martinique and, Eastern Caribbean. We were sitting on the leeward side of the island. We had our kiteboard gear on the boat, and then we have our, tender with, 20 horsepower outboard, which is amazing for getting around anywhere we want to go.
Yeah, it's your pickup truck.
Yeah. But what I was missing was, like you can't really kiteboard on the leeward side of these islands. They're big mountainous islands, super gusty wind. If you get in trouble, like you got to self-rescue with the kite, just a pain in the butt. And I also missed just paddling in general, both for exercise and also for exploring too. So I was thinking, how cool would it be if we could have a smaller boat that could sail, in these gustier conditions, or just paddle if it's light or no wind, and just be able to have fun with it and explore and get some exercise and this all-in-one craft. And to me, like, this kind of boat was the perfect thing to do that in. So I can't wait to get back to some anchorages like that, in the Bahamas. I mean, in the Bahamas, it's all low-lying land, so you don't have the same problem with gusty conditions. But, in the Caribbean or wherever, and just be able to use this boat to have fun exploring, sailing around lagoons, maybe even doing some downwind surfing runs like we do on our, on our surf skis and stuff like that.
That's great. Yeah, I'm so jealous. I got to a place where I live mainly vicariously now. So it just sounds like tremendous fun. Just any place in the Bahamas, like it is wonderful afternoon sea breezes, blowing 15 to 20 every afternoon.
Yeah. And when it's calm, be able to paddle out and try to, spearfish or fish off it or something. I mean,
remember that being, one of the design considerations was that I knew you did, from your YouTube channel, I knew you spent a lot of time scuba diving and stuff like that. So the Amos had in mind that you would be reboarding over those. So, the rounded edges and having enough buoyancy so that you can pull yourself up onto those. It'd be a good way to kind of, compared to a dinghy or something like that, a way better boat for skin diving or scuba diving or whatever it is.
Yeah. And so John, you touched on it, and especially some of the learning curves along the way, but how overall, how'd the boat come out in the very end, after the EC, after everything, compared to like the very beginning when we first started talking about it, your first drawings? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm thrilled. And, I can't, the Everglades challenge is really like the ultimate small boat filter as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I was there for the very first one in a boat that got filtered out 10 miles in. And we've been a sponsor one way or the other for almost every race for the last 20 years. So you've gotten to know the people and watched what boats worked and what boats didn't. And, the incidence of kind of gear failure or boats not being suited because, for example, maybe they needed to use human power to go upwind to get to a checkpoint, up some narrow channel, something like that. If they were ungainly under human power, they don't, also just the amount of equipment failure. And, I'm sort of dazzled that as far as I know, you didn't have any stuff breaking on the boat. And, it was turning in the kind of speeds that we had talked about when it was just a drawing, and, that it was dry and safe. And that doesn't often happen with a new design on such a challenging 250 plus mile adventure race. So boat that was only, the paint was just drying, and maybe you'd had it maybe 3 weeks in the water, maybe something like that. So had a chance to catch some little things, but all in all, that it went from the drawing stage to the finish of the Everglades Challenge, without anything really worth writing home about is something that I'm proud of, and I know that Jay and Cody and Steve and all the folks who worked on the boat at CLC back in January were really excited and to see their long hours and hard work make it to the finish with a couple of smiling people.
And in just 2 months from, like you said, right? Like from when we first made Sawdust.
I think I counted the days, and it was really it's like 35 days from when you guys loaded it, and from when you guys started building to the first time you at least took it for a paddle or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I guess by the time we finished the race, it was about 3 months from when we first got to CLC to when at the race finish, or race start rather. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was. Yeah. I mean, just that's a really short period of time. I feel like, yeah, like I have been a part of a lot of these kind of marathon expedition, projects that are not only just building a boat, but then going and the boat goes and does something. And so many times the boat is just not ready. It's just not finished. It's just not ready. And I did feel, notwithstanding our kind of a few last minute tweaks the night before, it wasn't even really that late. I stayed up all night to get boats working. And, no, I got a good night's sleep, and, so did you guys, I think. And nothing broke. And it was, I think it's a pretty solid concept in that respect. The fact that I steered towards simplicity from the start probably helped a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome, John. We couldn't be happier with it, and yeah, we're super excited to keep using it, and I'm sure tweaking and modifying it, just little things here and there, and just fine-tuning it. But yeah, we're so pumped with how it came out, and yeah, to be able to finish the Everglades Challenge for our first time in it and have nothing break, and yeah, it's so cool. So we can't thank you enough, and Chesapeake Lightcraft enough, and all the guys over there. So we're super excited.
Thank you. No, it's just, again, living vicariously. I run a desk most of the time, so unlike everybody else, I get to watch your adventures, and it's just really exciting to be a small part of it. And I think that this boat is gonna lengthen your horizons. You can go someplace really cool. Set up your a couple of anchors and lock up the mothership, and then go have an adventure up a river, or that kind of thing. And that's the coolest thing about small boats. So.
Yeah. You can really get to places you can't get to in the big boat. Yeah.
Sure. Just some atoll somewhere that you can't explore in the big boat, you can go skimming around in this boat. And I can't wait to see the adventures you have.
Any idea of, it's, what is it, mid-March right now. Any idea when a kit might be developed for this, for anyone interested? Or?
I have a near 100% failure rate for predicting launch dates of designs and kits like this. So I'm gonna hold on that one.
Pass.
I think I'll pass, but the fact that we were there, it was in our shop, and so we have a mountain of construction photography. A lot of times, in fact, almost all the time, it was actually staged for good photography and video for how to build this thing. So there's just no question that we'll do a nice assembly manual, and either plans. It lends itself to being built from patterns. You can just all you need is the patterns for the two hulls, really, and the cross beams, and off you go. So, for someone who's built a strip plank boat, it'd be a very straightforward build, and they can doll it up a lot if they want, carbon fiber, this and that, or just a couple layers of E-glass and go sailing. Yeah.
In the last question, in the meantime, for someone who hasn't built a strip plank boat before, but someone who's very interested in building something like this, what do you think they might want to think about in the meantime while this kit gets developed, or any?
Well, I mean, yeah, we've got loads of sort of trimaran conversion types. We have a kit that you can basically put onto any kayak. It doesn't have to be one of our kayaks. It can be even a Rotomola kayak or something like that. If you want a trimaran where it's more of a double outrigger kind of thing, we've got a rig for that we've been selling since 1994.
Oh, wow.
That's 29 years or something like that. Coming up on it. It was like the summer of 94, I think. Maybe 95. So long time. Yeah, that's enjoyed a lot of development over the years. You can find some good articles about the CLC sail rig, the original, on our site. There's some good blog articles about it and things like that too, talking about its evolution. So that's a good way. And if if this is like, all right, I need this, but I want to build it, you can definitely build this boat if you have done some cabinet work, you're comfortable around tools, you can fill in some blanks and things like that. There's like actual woodworking on this compared to like the stitch and glue plywood boats where it's edging closer each year to IKEA furniture, where just kind of things slot together. This isn't going to be a slot together kind of boat, but as far as sailboats in its class go, it's probably one of the easier ones to build, I'd say.
Okay, awesome. Well, good. Well, give the people who don't have much experience, they'll get practicing in the meantime while you guys develop the kit.
Build a strip link canoe right quick that, you can build a little 12-foot pack canoe that you could store. You could carry it upside down last to the cross beams and, to have two boats go sailing with them both. So, yeah, small boats, they don't take up much room and, you're not paying marina bills. So I'd rather have 6 small boats than one big one. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and they look beautiful. Yeah, they look beautiful.
Job on the finish. It's like, as I told you, that's exactly how I'd have done it if I'd been my boat. I love the varnishing white. It's great. All right, Billy. Well, that's great. What fun! And I can't wait to see more video and hear about your adventures. And perhaps in my doddering old age, I'll have photos of you in Tahiti and beyond, sailing this boat around.
Awesome. Yeah, we can't thank you enough, John. And thanks for your time today. And yeah, thanks for everything.
It's great fun. All right.